All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to this panel, and wonderful to have him here. It's a true panel of greatness. I always love AIS, and first and foremost, a real big thank you to Grant and to Cambridge for the honor to co-host and to work alongside my brilliant friend Amber Edwards. But it is very much a wonderful opportunity to bring this panel to the stage with me because they are exceptional in every way. So I wanted to bring all of you here into this discussion because for the last few years, you've all been acutely focused on what I would say is one of the biggest shifts in medical aesthetics in recent years. And namely, we're talking about this dramatic movement in patients' desires away from synthetic, away from industrial, to now materials, treatments that I think are more naturally derived, biologically fully compatible. And here comes the buzzword for this panel, regenerative in nature. So, and really we're talking about treatments that are restorative in function. And what patients are telling us essentially is that they want their own bodies to do their own best work. And that's kind of what I want to dig into. We have seen explosive growth in anything that is labeled regenerative aesthetics, right? So if you look even at ChatGPT, if we believe these numbers for a minute, it really suggests even that the volume of searches for anything regenerative is now already outpacing the searches for fillers. And obviously with the explosive growth, we have seen a lot of new treatments coming into the market. We've seen a lot of new regulatory pathways. We've seen a lot of increased costs. So I really want to dig into it with this panel. So without further ado, let's maybe start with a very basic question. When we say regenerative aesthetics, you can think cellular repair, we can think tissue restoration, we can think collagen stimulation, but what does it mean to all of you? When I say regenerative aesthetics, how do you define it? So maybe Dr. Shridharani, let's start with you.
Perfect. So great to be here, first of all, and it's always nice to be among so many familiar faces, new faces, maybe even some Ozempic faces. I don't know. Let's see in the audience. Just teasing. So, fundamentally, I think when we look at what does regenerative end up really meaning, there's a lot of confusion surrounding it, and I think it's really much like in plastic surgery, the restoration of structure and function, but having your own body doing the heavy lifting. So we have that principle in plastic surgery, replace like with like, and we've often not had great tissue products that can actually restore that structure or function at a very cursory level. So for me, when I think about regenerative, if I'm presenting it to a patient, it's looking at, do we have something that actually helps stimulate your body, or can we give you something that is going to replenish and restore back to its normalcy, a product or a cellular tissue level? And that's probably the way that I look at it.
Yeah. Dr. Nykiel.
Nice to meet everybody. This is my first time here. I'm sorry, I just landed about 10 minutes ago.
You look amazing.
Straight here, yeah, in this hoodie. I thought I would buck the trend. To me, regenerative means products that we can utilize that give patients options that would not have otherwise had that option. And by that, I mean, my practice is primarily a body contouring, fat transfer practice. And for over a decade, we've said no to people. We said, no, you don't have enough fat. No, we can't do this. No, that's not an option. And now with regenerative products, we can. We can offer them fat. We can offer them products that improve their skin tone. We can offer products that change wound beds, change scars, things that we have said no to for so many years. We now have options that can help people.
Dr. Akash.
Thank you all for inviting me here. I actually think of regenerative medicine and really the buzzwords around it in three buckets that really fall on the spectrum. I think there's biostimulation, there's regeneration, and then there's tissue engineering. And I think biostimulation refers to providing a stimulus, by definition, to the body to do something And it might not always be in an organized fashion, and it might not always have a framework behind it. And so that's one part of it. I think when you get to regeneration, it's to restore through potentially biostimulation, but within an existing framework. And then I think the next step is tissue engineering, where you're actually building new or augmenting or going supraphysiologic in nature using your own tissues. So I think of kind of the simplest idea of this in nature like a chameleon losing its tail, right? If biostimulation is just growing cells kind of randomly and it doesn't really provide a functional tail, regeneration is replacing that tail and having the framework to do that biostimulation in an organized fashion. So I think that's really where regeneration is. And I think really the future is the tissue engineering aspect. That would be like making that tail into a leg that can do many other things. And that's making something different than it was before. So when we think about the aging process, we're doing some replacement, but there's other things we're doing that weren't there before, and we're making it actually more improved than what was lost. And I think that's the future of tissue engineering. And what a perfect place for us to talk about tissue engineering with the father of tissue engineering across the river at MIT, Bob Langer. And I worked in his lab as an undergrad, and I think really understanding that spectrum of biostimulation to regeneration to tissue engineering is really where the future of regenerative medicine as a whole goes.
Dr. Steve.
It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I think we all come from the lens of aesthetics, and what happens over time everywhere globally across the body is volume loss. And I come at this from the lens of breast enhancement specifically, but what we see in the breast is targeted volume loss. It happens from pregnancy, breastfeeding, weight loss, GLP-1 medications, time, life on Earth, gravity. And really as plastic surgeons, we've been constrained over time with trying to provide a volume replacement that happens globally across the body. And we've been restricted with things like implants, fillers. And this opens up a whole new world of being able to provide volume replacement with things that actually restore and rebuild using the body itself. And that's an exciting thing for us, and it's a very exciting thing for our patients.
Now, the growth has been so explosive for a category of treatments like this. Why do we believe that's happening right now? And do we actually think it's going to stick?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of why we're seeing it right now really translate, made a tongue-in-cheek joke about the GLP explosion, but really we've seen such a profound impact in a very short period of time on people with losing substantial amounts of volume in somewhat unpredictable facets. Historically, we really see rapid weight loss in a bariatric body contouring type of patient and some of the manifestations of that on the face as well. But now you have relatively healthy individuals losing pretty substantial amounts of volume quite quickly. That depletion of subcutaneous fat, that impact even on a hormonal capacity on the skin at the cellular level, also understanding more about the focus on menopause and women's health, that whole sort of confluence has led to a rapid need to understand how we can do things other than just plump a patient back up. And so I think what we've seen with our biocompatible but synthetic dermal fillers and some of those elements have given us a really great platform. We wouldn't be here without those treatments and technologies, but some of those also have to continue to evolve because we've been using them for 20 plus years now. So this renewed interest really stems from patients not wanting to be overfilled, not wanting to be overvolumized, being depleted, having hormonal changes that we're understanding, and what that looks like at the skin level and at the subcutaneous volume level as well.
Other thoughts on that, other catalyst that you believe is spurring all this growth?
So I think it's a very unique time. So we have obviously information that's being able to be disseminated in real time, just speed of light, whether that be social media, mostly social media. And you have such a buzzword like regenerative medicine that in itself just sounds cool, right? I mean, like the idea of it sounds great. You couple that with the ability to get that information out, and now with technology, we have products that actually, I think, work a lot better. I think if you were to have this discussion 10 years ago, and you would talk about regenerative products, we would all say, yeah, there's a lot of promise there. Yeah, that looks like that could be cool. But now we're actually moving to the period where we're able to implement a lot of these products, a lot of these services, see results, and then disseminate that information on just wide platforms to a number of people that already captures people's interest. I think it's just a very unique catalyst time right now.
I think there's 3 factors that really play into why this is coming together now. We have the hyperconnectivity, like you were mentioning, through social media, but patients are able to find people like them. So patients who have issues with breast implants, patients who have specific inflammatory conditions, all sorts of things, they're very easily able to find somebody like me, their own army out there, to have an echo chamber within. And those echo chambers go really fast and really hard. I think they also have now access to unlimited information with the AI tools, being able to query scientific literature. And I think what they've seen over the last 10 years is sometimes these subtle techniques and treatments that really haven't given them the results that they've wanted. They said, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And we have this world of biohacking. So I think the issue is people are going to do it. They're finding it, and they have access to information to do it and the network to do it themselves. And there's a huge interest in this from a DIY community aspect. I think the responsibility for us in this is really to equip people with the right information and be the harbingers of science and treatments that do work and have meaningful change for patients, so that we shift that into our clinics rather than having it done in an unregulated and uncontrolled fashion.
I think to some degree, you're totally right, as it sounds cool. The terminology itself it kind of fits into the category of a lot of other buzzwords that patients are focused on: wellness, longevity, and I think this really fits in there well. And I think in the aesthetic world, we're seeing a lot of patients tend to trend a little bit more towards more natural, undetectable looks. And being that this is something that actually uses your own body to rebuild and restore, what better way to do that? Within the lens of the breast implant world and the breast aesthetics world, I would say there are some driving factors with a dark history of some of the synthetic products. And I would say that is similar in terms of what we've seen in the past with some of the synthetic tools that we've used for volume replacement elsewhere in the body. So I think those are some of the driving forces as well. But we also live in this world of, as you mentioned, hyperconnectivity, where word travels fast, and if you can provide solutions that actually work, that's what we're in the business of doing, is helping patients solve problems. And this is category expansion in a way that we're able to do that in a way we haven't been before.
All right, we're going to do a bit of a rapid fire game here now. And it's a simple thumbs up, down, or in the middle. So we talked about how truly there's been all these different types of regenerative aesthetic treatments that have come about. And so with that, I think there's this question about, is it cool? Is it actually scientifically backed? What's the data on this? Does it actually work? So I want to kind of hear all of your sort of feedback on different kinds of treatments. So again, thumbs up, down, in the middle, meaning you like it, you don't like it, or the jury's still out. So first and foremost, polynucleotides. Up, down, in the middle. All right, let's hear a bit of why. Dr. Shridharani, why? Up.
Sure. So, I mean, look, a big part for us in our practice, we oversee over 7,000 patient touch points per year for patients enrolled in clinical trials alone in our practice. The jury's out on a lot of these, so that's why I think we have these different components. PDRN, polynucleotides, very new. New to the U.S., not new to other global markets, but still, science is still kind of out there. But for what we see, we definitely know that there is, at least I feel, that there is enough compelling information that we see a more rapid turnover of cells, an increased healing pathway forward. So even if it's not going to necessarily be the highest functioning version, I still do think that it does help in improving the overall healing process.
An opposing view. I saw somebody with a down and in the middle.
I think in the spectrum, in terms of like true regenerative versus like just biostimulatory. It's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
I think the outcome measures are really difficult for some of these, especially when there's such a it's so many different variables that patients are doing that may trump the effects of one of these things, augment or dampen them as well. So I think it's really hard individually for some of these things that, what is our true outcome that's not in a petri dish, but in a patient that is quantifiable, especially when it comes to things like skin texture, skin tone. There are things out there, but they're very nuanced and affected by lots of different things.
I'm always a little leery when we hear just information from other countries. I think being around long enough,
The European will take no offense to that, though.
Yeah,
Matt.
it's true though, right? Like, for those of us that have been, we've all heard things that work wonderfully. That comes from name your country, and then we get it here in the U.S. and we try it, and we're all kind of like, yeah, it's okay. It's not that great. So until we start to see that this has been tried and true, that's when I come more around to it from a clinical side.
Right. Second category, a big one, exosomes. Up, down, in the middle. You got to choose one. Up. All right. Let's start with in the middle again, Dr. Steve.
So I would say here is where there's a lack of like regulatory information out there. And while I think this probably does fit more here, we're just at a space right now where a lot of the products that are out there, we don't even really know what's in them. So it's hard to make a comment one way or another about where we are. And the use of them is so varied in terms of how people are applying them versus injecting them versus, and I think we're just in our early understanding of the actual data to back up where we are there.
I think it's just too large of a catchphrase, and we're going to be speaking about it later in the session as well as in the entire meeting about exosomes. But the word exosome itself is, when I talk to patients about, it's like an Amazon package. It could come with nothing in it. It could come with bad stuff in it. It could come with good stuff in it, and you don't really know what's in it, and really what's inside of it, and where it's sourced from, and how that affects the tissues for the application that you're doing really matters, whether it's you're doing it from hair or for scars or for generalized skin health. I think there are exosomes that are useful for each of those. There are some exosomes that may not do anything and might be more than just moisturizers that they're sending. I think the idea of a vesicle that has signaling molecules in it is a great idea, but how those actually get to the target tissues that you want and affect them in an organized fashion, when we talk about regeneration, doing things in an organized fashion rather than randomly, collagen doesn't necessarily just all mean good volume, right? Yeah. And so I think we have to be careful in how we speak about things, and just the word exosome itself doesn't mean much to me.
I guess my question for the panelists, do we consider salmon sperm an exosome? Would you consider that an exosome?
It kind of falls more within the PDRN category, right? Because of the DNA component to it, as opposed to an exosome.
But there's so much things in it, I guess, right?
Sure.
Like you just don't know. And that's to your point. Is people put this on, including my staff. They smuggle it in from wherever, and they put it on their face. And I'll notice, and I'll be like, God, they do look a lot better. Their face looks good. And then they'll be like, yeah, I've been putting salmon sperm on my face. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess that works. So to your point, no idea what's in it, right? But some portion of that exosome, polynucleotides, some version of that somewhere is helpful. I just don't know what aspect of it.
So, Carol, if I could just take 10 seconds then, or 30 seconds maybe. So I align with so much everyone is saying here. I tend on these first two to be pretty bullish or excited about it, because I also think if we use the same thought process and apply it to even surgery, okay? Liposuction, good operation, bad operation. Got countless cases that we're having to revise. We don't know what that surgical procedure being performed is. Is there a primary endpoint or primary outcome to it being studied as a prospective randomized clinical trial? I think we also have to take a step back and look at some of these things and say, well, we don't know necessarily what's in it. We're seeing an improvement. We're seeing this. as a catch-all phrase, is this surgical procedure a good operation? Well, when you've got good exosomes, they work well. If you have good secretome or good stock, they work well. If you have a good surgical procedure, it goes well. When it's poorly executed or you have an empty package, of course it's not going to go well. So I think we have to look at it from a broader category. There are so many things actually in aesthetic medicine that are often actually not studied with a primary measure and primary outcome. So if we're going to say, let's keep it at the level 1 evidence, highest standard going through here, which we should have that bar, a lot of things that we do would not meet that primary endpoint or bar. We don't actually have those outcomes and measures. So I think it's interesting to think about it from that lens, but also to understand that, just like you said, there are certain things that we aren't able to fully quantify, but we see a substantial improvement. Just because we can't answer the why yet doesn't mean there's not a lot of merit to it. Maybe our ability to actually test for those parameters are just antiquated, and we need better technology to actually look at how to get a primary endpoint for cell surface or texture or overall quality of improvement, or quantify how many fibroblasts are in the tissue. So that, I think, is really important before we also are too down or so neutral, because we do see improvement in a lot of these technologies too.
But I think it's a fair point, right? I think what you're bringing up is something we have to be acutely aware of, which is the demand right now for anything regenerative is just exceeding the scientific evidence. And I think that that has a risk of some dilution of the potential. And we've come a long way in the last 2 decades to try to continuously raise the bar and the standards in our market. And I think that's something that we have to really keep in mind.
And then to everybody's point, they try these products out that we don't know what they are.
Right.
Put it up online, show the videos, show the before and afters. They find echo chambers for people that are exactly like that, and it just accelerates that demand for something that's somewhat unknown.
Right. All right. Rapid fire. Growth factors, peptides, up, down, in the middle.
I'm so bullish on this from personal experience. Love it.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to try to move through this. PRP, PRF. Care to elaborate? Anybody? And
I think there's, the things we're talking about are somewhat more targeted, can be more targeted than PRP, PRF, and potentially more efficacious for patients for the specific needs. I think if we think about it from, like, what is a platelet-rich plasma fraction, we have things coming from the bloodstream, whereas things coming from maybe the base of a hair follicle stem cell, or from an exosome from a fetal tissue. I think there's things that might provide an outcome that's trying to get that are better than just that might be more differentiating.
PRP's been around since I've been in med school, and it's gone from different specialties. I think the first one that I remember is ortho. They were trying to sell it to ortho. It didn't work on the studies. Then they moved it to gen surg. I think now at Lance they're trying to say it regrows hair, but I can tell you that doesn't work, because if it does, this would not be up here. So I'm not sold on PRP. Peptides I am. I personally
works on
use
Sachin.
Yeah, exactly. Look at this luscious lock right here.
All right. Interest of time, I'm going to try to sound very unbiased. Adipose tissue, allogeneic, autologous. Up. Tell me why.
Well, I can't sit next to the president of that company and say no. So, no, I'm just teasing. I mean, look, I think that there is tremendous opportunity there. It's exciting to be able to have the intact adipocytes and the extracellular matrix. I'm pretty excited about it. We've been studying it and looking at it. We're looking at its retention. We're coming up on a year of following these patients out. We're looking at high satisfaction, low adverse event profile. Across the board, again, it's one of the first times we've ever had something off the shelf where we can replace like with like. Everything else that we've been doing to replenish subcutaneous fat loss if you don't have autologous fat is with basically a synthetic type of molecule or biostims, right? And Akash was mentioning that category earlier, and that's something that we're always been excited about, but you just can't get necessarily the same outcomes. And I'm a firm believer in a lot of those biostim injectables and use them a lot, do clinical trials on them, et cetera. But I'm pretty excited about the future of it.
We've been using it for over a year. We have a 100% satisfaction rate. 100% of the people have actually come back to get more. I absolutely love this product. goes back to the first thing I said, which is we now have answers that actually work, that patients see differences, and we're able to do so much more with. We love it.
Yeah, I think we've been using it for about a year in our practice, and I think there's something to the patient avatar that of no downtime and having something off the shelf is very attractive for that very busy patient who doesn't want to come in for repeated treatments. They want something that's their own, that becomes their own, and they feel like there's permanence to it. It gets away from this idea of let's do something every few months and see if it works and you'll get a generalized benefit. People want a now result. They want a little bit of downtime, and it's been very successful in our practice from that end. And I think successful compared to generalized fat grafting as well, because I think about host blood supply all the time, and breast and buttock is very different than face, where we do have really great success with fat grafting, and I see a lot of problems from fat grafting to other areas. So I think optimizing the host area to do that is tough, but when now we have something that doesn't rely on that host blood supply to create a scaffold, and it does so in a more structured way than ever has been done before. So that structure is super important to that, so that patients can get a real outcome.
And I think this is more easily quantifiable because it's one of our first high volume tools that we have, and it's easy to see the volume, so it's easier to quantify the impact. And I agree, it has high satisfaction rates. I would say of all of the things, if I was being really critical, like all of these technologies, I work with a pretty well-educated patient population, and even patients want more data.
Yeah. All right, a question specific for each and every one of you. Dr. Shridharani, you're probably one of the most published surgeons here in the room. You obviously have a deep passion for anything that's innovative. Elaborate a little bit on truly which regenerative aesthetic treatments are you doubling down on and why?
Sure. I mean, we've already kind of captured a lot of them in here. I mean, I think some of the regenerative ones, I've liked some of the new data on Sculptra that's come out. I think even though we have a synthetic molecule in polyl-lactic acid, if you look at a lot of the histology and so much of the gene regulation data they've looked at, it seems like there's a lot more regenerative capacity to it than we once thought. So that's been something that's been really exciting and interesting to me because the upregulation of elastogenesis and some of those different markers that we just weren't aware of. Yep. So that's been pretty nicely backed by science. I do really love Alakai. I know I'm sitting next to you in that sense, but that I do really think truly. I mean, we were early adopter, one of your first 5 practices in the world for your studies, and we've just seen such a tremendous amount of improvement. So I'm excited for what's new with Dermaclay. So hopefully we'll be talking about that a year from now with your facial products. And then I think probably the third one that's also been really interesting has been introducing Secretome into our practice, which is the product that's from Acorn, which is extracting the hair follicle, plucking hairs, and then using that to really start to expand the ability of a patient's autologous tissue to be able to use their autologous growth factors rather than synthetic off the shelf, and we've had a lot of success. So those are probably my top 3 that I've been excited about from 2025 carrying over into this year.
Awesome. Dr. Nykiel, you are probably the most obsessive about tracking your patient analytics. So you've been tracking their behaviors. You're always using the data to decide, essentially what women really want. So can you elaborate a little bit about what you're seeing in your analytics? What are consumers really needing, wanting, all the things?
Yeah, so I very sort of true to this panel, and true to, I think, today, we're seeing a big push towards, we have 2 groups of people, right? We have an aging out population, say mid-30s and on, that you've had major sort of catchphrases of bioidentical hormones. I'd say be the one major keyword that's hit the most, right? We have a group of people, sort of mid-30s and younger, that are just about natural plastic surgery. I think that's kind of, we've seen that shift. I think 5-10 years ago it was bigger is better, certainly when we talk about butts. And we've seen that shift back towards a more natural shape. specifically, obviously, sitting next to you when we talk about our allograft donor fat, Alloclay, it's just been an explosion of people interested because for so long, there's just a completely untapped market of people that for plastic surgery, we've said no to for so long. And now we can actually provide treatments that we couldn't before from a analytical patient satisfaction. It's just off the chart.
Yeah. And on that note, Dr. Steve, so to the point that Dr. Nykiel just made, right, about you're a plastic surgeon, but the market is trending towards less and less and less. And you've really embraced that in sort of your clinical approach. And I love this interview that you did a while back, and you talked about quiet luxury. So can you elaborate on that clinically? What have you changed? How are you really kind of branding yourself to match that demand?
Yeah, I think it goes back.
Oh, Akash, I think this is for Dr. Steve for a minute.
I think the quiet luxury is really the concept that you don't look like you've had any work done. And Alloclay is the perfect option for that. I, within the lens of breast, work with kind of 3 categories of women who are seeking breast enhancement for the first time. And some of those patients want a non-implant based option.
Right.
And some of those patients want their implants to look the most natural. So they combine these techniques with implants. And then I work with a population of women who've had breast enhancement and are unhappy with it. And we haven't had the tools to be able to offer them a volume replacement alternative that was somewhere in between implants and fat transfer in terms of the structure we can provide. And then lastly, there's a whole group of women out there who are very unhappy with the aesthetic outcomes of their breast reconstruction. And a lot of those women don't have fat, or they've had fat grafting multiple times. And for those patients, option that can restore and rebuild with their own body really fits the, I guess, task of what they're asking for. And so that's a whole nother world of women, I think, that can benefit from this technology.
Yeah. And last but not least, Dr. Akash, so you saw this sort of shift towards regenerative aesthetics very early on and far beyond the face, and you really started to focus on that for the body, incorporating tissue, fat, autologous, allogeneic, and so talk a little bit about how you see plastic surgery, moving forward and sort of what the future should look like.
I think you have to focus on your patient avatar and what they're saying and what their needs are. I have kind of a different take on it, and probably maybe a different patient population than Dr. Anna, in that my patients aren't looking for the silent result. They're saying, I only have a certain amount of downtime, and I'm not going to stay out of the gym for more than a little bit of time. So I need everything you can do to make a real difference now, and I better see it. And so I think regenerative medicine has been this kind of slow and steady building collagen process that people can't really see immediately, and you tell them to have to wait over a year or period of time, which is very frustrating for those patients who don't want to keep coming in, and then you lose that patient. I think patients who want the wow and now is here, at least in my patient population, and essentially you have to listen to your patient population to understand how that regenerative outcome is going to be there. I think now having the tools to have the wow and now regenerative products, such as Alloclay, are really useful in my practice, and that really helped bridge the tissue engineering and a surgical gap that I had for patients who wouldn't do surgery because of downtime.
Yeah. So I think that wraps it up for us, but for all of us in the room on the industry side, on the investor side, I think that you've explained it very well. The demand for regenerative is very high. You want it, you need it, but I think that also the criticality is just as high, and I think that's upon us to make sure that we kind of bridge the two. So much, much appreciate the candor. Thank you.